Welcome to episode 7 of Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher, and with me today is Adam Bartleman. With me always is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Before we hopped on, Adam talked to me about objectification, and just that's kind of where we're going to jump into today, folks. And Adam, I'll just let you take it from there, my friend.
Yeah, thanks again, as always, for having me, Stephen. Yeah, so we've touched a little bit touched a little bit on the relationship that men have with this world and to women right now in this current climate. And the big topic is absolutely objectification of women, as has been discussed for a long time. And I wanted to go a little more deeply into it and recognize what is behind it. It's not just a label for a problem, right? Like really understand what's behind it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think what probably insulated me from this with with my situation, right, was I had a lot of amazing women in my life. I was raised by, had a very strong presence of women in my life. I think what I lacked in my life was more of a stronger male presence in my life. I was always searching for that. My dad was always working, and that's just, he just wasn't home, right? And not that he wasn't out of the family or out of the picture, but he was just, yeah, he was working. And so what was in that place instead, I had my older sister, Kara, who is amazing, and I love her, and she's always been there, and my mother and my grandmother, just like three strong women in my life, three amazing women in my life that, yeah, that I love so much, and I'm really, really grateful for. But as you said, I do notice that men without that presence, or without that representation directly in their life, sometimes there's this separation of viewing women as people, right? As viewing women as humans. Again, objectification, right? You literally objectify women, you see them as objects, not people with emotions or, their own experiences. And that's really a problem, for men.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. It's another similarity that we have that's similar to my upbringing as well. Dad wasn't around much. Then parents got divorced. Really didn't see him much, but always had strong women around. And even going later through life, it that was always the case. So I think that like you, I was insulated in that way as well. However, not completely immune to the
Societal
total.
propaganda. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, totally. I had
yeah,
to unlearn a lot of things as well.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, me too. So yeah, it's something I thought about, especially working in male dominated industries, as I mentioned before, construction and emergency services. I really had many experiences where I really heard, like, where I heard some things that were very questionable. At first, in many instances, thought that these things were jokes, but in many cases, came to find out that some men really do not see women as human beings. And we use that word objectification. That's a phrase that we've heard for a long time. Objectification of women is a problem, but like when something gets turned into just a phrase because we've heard it repeated so many times, it can lose some of its meaning. But really, we have to look at these things and like really feel into what that means. So, what does it mean to objectify another person? Well, turning a person into an object means you're dehumanizing them. So, understanding that at the root of this is dehumanization, and so really to kind of bring some more to add some more weight to this conversation, just to frame it a little bit differently. We're still talking about the same thing, but just sort of refreshing the awareness here. And then to take it a little bit further is understanding that if we are able to dehumanize someone else, that means that we have dehumanized ourselves. that means that we have absorbed some beliefs at some point that have essentially separated us from our own humanity in a different way. Nonetheless, it is dehumanization. So that's that's kind of, yeah, where I wanted to take the conversation. But yeah, just to quickly ask, like, have you witnessed that kind of thing as well? Like, has that been common for your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, anytime there's been male dominated situations. I also worked in construction. And yeah, yeah, it's, they call it like what, like locker room talk. And it's, yeah,
Totally.
to look
Yeah.
back on those memories, it was disgusting. Right.
Mhm.
And I see the only, or like an antidote that I see sometimes, not an antidote, but like a realization that I see some men have is when they have a daughter, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh my god, like I don't want I don't want someone to treat my daughter as I treated women." And, that's their aha moment to be like, "Oh my god, like women are people."
Yeah.
When it should have happened, way sooner, right, in their life. And so, I mean, I guess better late than never, but at the same time, we as men have to do better at just recognizing this stuff as early as possible, with the caveat that yes, society is inundating us with messaging against that fact. But yeah, man, for me it was just yeah, yeah, early, young, right? It's just kind of, how it goes. And um unfortunately, but that's why we're here today, is try to hopefully
Yeah.
course correct, and help others along that path.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point you brought up about the aha moment that some men have when they have a daughter.
Yep.
Because I've observed that as well, but I've also observed men who have daughters still behaving in such a way that, I assume they're still sort of categorizing women differently. Because this is something that I've witnessed where, like, they'll still speak in a derogatory way about certain women, uh, and maybe it's some sort of stratification in their minds, some sort of class thing. Like, well, my family's different. My daughter is different. The women that I know are different, but I can still treat those women over there in a different way. And this is like just another layer and another nuanced part of this conversation, because that's something that I've observed. I've observed some men clue in and change their ways, and some men just continue to uh, sort of hide it away and make excuses and further the separation in their own mind.
Yeah, because you see, that's a really good point actually, because you see, I mean, I've heard anecdotal evidence of, maybe that father, that girl gets a little bit older, like maybe late teenage years or whatever, and the father is being creepy towards that daughter's friends. Or, just
Yeah,
like that's an example of like you are clearly dehumanizing that's a girl, that's a young child still, and and a friend of your daughter. And I feel like that's a story that you hear time and time and again of, just a weird example like that. That is
yeah,
unacceptable, you know?
yeah,
And yeah, so you're right. I mean, I guess, on it's a spectrum, right? It's a spectrum of experience, like maybe, yeah, I guess I was being hopeful, honestly, but yeah, I
yeah.
guess you're going more towards, yeah, it's just realistic that there's darker layers towards this for sure.
Yeah, and one specific experience, so an anecdote that I'll share was some people that I used to work with, and some guys I heard were going to a strip club after like a work party. And I remember just thinking, like, I remember focusing on one person in particular, because a couple guys there I knew had daughters, but one guy had a daughter who was like 19, 20 years old at the time. And so I just thought to myself, I was like, man, you could very easily be going into a situation where you're seeing a stripper, like exotic dancer, however I'm supposed to say that, who might be like more or less the same exact age as your daughter. I remember thinking this, it was kind of in passing, but I remember thinking about it afterward, and I was like, well, there's got to be a really huge disconnect going on in that case because, like, I mean, I would imagine that someone would be in a situation like that and really it would hit home if they realized that. But this person didn't seem to care. And again, this is an assumption. And I obviously wasn't there for when they actually went, but that seems to have been the case. And I remember just really going, wow, if that is the case, men need help because that's um that's really distorted. That's really out of alignment. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, just throwing that anecdote in there.
Yeah, it's just weird. And again, it kind of goes back to episode 5 where we talk about lust, where it's just like you're letting that primal, instinctual urges dictate your life decisions. And when you separate that aspect of your brain from a more like rational, empathetic aspect, and can you look at that situation and think it's okay? I don't I don't think so, right?
No, no, I don't think so. And that's where the split happens. And this is essentially where the dehumanization might be self-imposed through a lack of ability or a lack of a desire to look at that stuff. So, because there are going to be some uncomfortable feelings there naturally. So that split can kind of occur where we just kind of push things down, sort of
Yeah.
bottle something up and push it down and keep it in the shadow. And that's how, while in this specific case, the way we're discussing it, while the dehumanization of women is much more clear in the the rampant objectification that is so prevalent, especially in a patriarchal society where generally the power balance is in favor of men. It can still be happening to men, to straight men doing it to themselves through that kind of loop that they can get stuck in. And again, when you're allowing your awareness, your energy to be stuck in those lower centers, those lower aspects of our awareness, those more primal energies, as you said.
Right. And so just to take your example, right? That coworker was not seeing that exotic dancer as a human, right?
Totally.
More just a means to an end to satisfy an urge. And it comes down to, I think, how do we define what a healthy man looks like?
Mm.
And what are the behaviors of a healthy man? I think that was, when I started to develop that idea, and I would love to hear your opinions on that, like what you think that those characteristics are, what that looks like. Um, as opposed to, what are unhealthy characteristics, which I think this is an example of that, right? Yeah, yeah. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the word integrity, and,
Yeah.
and what does it mean to be in integrity? Like it means to be whole, right? So to not have left anything out, to not have left out a part of your awareness, that part of your awareness that knows, like for that um, person that mentioned before, that part of the awareness where he knows that this is a human being he's watching, but he's going to have to push that part of him away so that the other part of him can objectify that person and get that low level of enjoyment out of the experience. So to be in integrity would be to not push any parts of ourselves away, to bring all of ourselves back into awareness, all of ourself, the split off parts of ego, so that we can be looking at the world from a place of integrity, looking through a clear lens, looking in the mirror and seeing a clear reflection. Because without that, I don't believe that it's possible to really move through the world without those blind spots. And again, finding the blind spots is an ongoing process. But that's kind of what I see as a healthy man or a healthy person in
Yeah.
general. Yeah.
Yeah. Baseline is just, yeah, living in integrity.
Mhm.
Um, What else? What else do you think? Because I have some ideas, right, as well. But is that so? That's the I would say that's the foundation, right? You know, the core foundation of yeah, just being a healthy person is yeah, living in
Yeah.
integrity. What's the
Yeah, I
next
think
building
in
block?
totally. I think integrity and really an examination of what that means and an ongoing meditation on what integrity means to you and allowing that to unfold will build that foundation because I mean we can get into the specific points and absolutely that's an interesting conversation. So yeah, I mean let me know what comes to mind for you.
Um, I think as men, and especially as it relates to women, and especially when it comes to this conversation, you're talking about vulnerable populations, right?
Mm,
And um, when it comes to men, I think to be protectors, right, of children, of women, you know, it's just the men, and it's often against other men, right? Other men are committing the violence.
mhm,
So in most in majority of the cases. So it's like in order to I think it's really important as a man to protect the vulnerable populations because they're much more at risk, than you are, right?
yeah,
I'm 6'2", I'm 205 pounds. I am much less at risk at having violence committed against me than, a small child or, a woman that weighs, buck 20,
yeah,
she's 5'3", right? It's just like my risk is less. But so if I see that in society, if I see a man harassing a woman or a child even, it's just like I kind of feel obligated to either call that out or step in,
mhm.
to so that's one thing that comes to mind. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that point off the bat.
Yeah, yeah, that's an important consideration is recognizing the role of protector because ultimately it's kind of like the same thing with the environment, right? Like being a steward of the environment rather than just taking from it. But I think that that's an extremely important one because there are so many different populations, and when we look at the whole sort of power dynamic or the pyramid in which we live here, there's a lot of elements to look at, right? There are a lot of layers of privilege because even like you just mentioned there, um, not only being a man, but as you mentioned, like being like a taller, well built guy. That is also another layer of privilege. Like I've overheard someone sharing a story of getting jumped and mugged at a train station in uh where I used to live and I remember thinking, oh wow, like there's a guy sitting over there who ticks all the boxes probably for privilege that most people would consider just based on a very quick assumptive assessment, but then there's that added element of like he wasn't a very big guy, and I was like, well, then that's not something that I have to think about. Like I can walk alone at night anywhere, more or less, and not never think about those things. So that is an important thing is to recognize on all levels and for all populations. It's really just it's being a protector rather than a taker, right? Rather than an abuser,
Right.
right? Using that power for good, not using it for egoic, personal gain, right?
Yeah, warrior in the garden
And
type of mentality.
yeah, yeah,
I don't want to be a warrior all the time. I don't
hmm
want to be committing violence all the time, but I I also want to be capable if I need to defend people I care about or maybe strangers, right, that are vulnerable, right, to people that are trying to enact violence against a more vulnerable population, right? And I think that gets into another conversation of like, just taking care of yourself. I know you remain physically active, right? Same with me, right? I like to be. and I think that solves a whole host of issues as well, right? Being in your body,
Mm.
kind of calms down the mind as well, so I think there's a lot of benefit to that stuff as well. But I think, yeah, man, protector's a big one up on that list for me. But then again, using it with integrity. It's not like I'm like going out and trying to like fight crime or something, you know? Again, back to our conversation about superheroes.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, yeah, I think that's a really one. That's a really big one for me,
Yeah.
you know.
I don't know.
I think another one on that list is because yeah, because with these bodies that are more capable, it's um and I see this with, people in the armed forces as well, right? People that are really capable of violence. They know the consequences of it, right? And so it's like you don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
And because it's yeah, it's the worst aspects of humanity, I would say, is, committing violence against one another. Like we say, oneself, like we're all one, we're all one. If you're committing violence against another person, you're committing violence against yourself. What if that's you in another lifetime? What if you go back and you're that person in a different lifetime, you
Exactly.
know?
And that wisdom comes through lived experience, and that's why someone who has that lived experience is less likely to choose it and to engage in it. The person talking shit and starting fights at the house party is likely the least actually experienced in that sort of realm. And
Yeah,
not to mention the host of trauma that comes with that, of course. But just to put it very simply, it's yeah, those who know don't want anything to do with that, right? It's just
yeah,
like anything, taking advantage of people, right? The men that are out there taking advantage of and abusing women, it hasn't come back to them in their lived experience to see how their actions are hurting everyone, including themselves, right? So again, to go back to our other example of maybe the men who have a daughter finally wake up, and that's their sort of karmic moment to realize the error of their ways. Like it might take that, because things need to be made personal when we're still in the separated ego consciousness, when we're still not when we're seeing things through the lens of like, this is just me here, and I'm out to get the most for me and mine, and protect my neck at all costs, and that's it. Then it needs to be made personal, and that karmic journey will bring it back to that in some way. And it seems like for a lot of men, it's having a daughter, and I think that's a common one, that this discussion, men seeing that men seeing the error of their ways only after having it be directly relatable to them, which again is still an egoic thing, right? It's like, again, you only care because it's your daughter, or you're only able to conceptualize this because you have a daughter. It's still pretty narrow, right? Again, with the example of the person that I used to work with. Um, but it's a step, hopefully.
yeah. Some people, go their whole lives without making any progress. Some people die without coming to any sort of realization.
Mhm.
A lot of people are stubborn, especially in their old age. Like I think we've talked about before, and there's no room for growth there. And so I would say if any, men are hearing these sort of things and they like, they retreat behind their walls,
Yeah.
that's not me or that's not true. Um, Ask the women in your life, ask around. And an unfortunate reality of this world is that most women are victims of some sort of men in some way, shape, or form. At its worst case is murder, right? At a lesser degree, but still awful, is sexual assault. A
Yeah.
lesser degree, but still not good, is maybe verbal abuse or physical abuse. Um,
Mhm.
all those things are not good. Um, but a lot of women, I think most women I talk to, they're a victim in some way, shape, or form of any of those things. And
Yes.
yeah, man, so it's just like if men aren't aware that that's a reality for women every day, you're lying to yourself.
Exactly. If you're finding yourself getting defensive over this conversation, over these kinds of ideas, that's an if something is getting sort of uh disturbed in there, then that is an indication that there's some work to do. There's something to be looked at. And absolutely go talk to the women in your life because we're just a couple of guys here getting this conversation started, but we're not the experts on this.
Mm-mm.
We don't know anything about this truly. We're all like from the inside perspective. We're looking at this from the outside. So absolutely, if you ever wish to learn something really about any topic, is go to the people who are most directly affected by it.
Yeah,
And again, this is hopefully as far as I can see, and what I'm hoping for. My intention here is to be moving in integrity in such a way that we are using our energy to create the conversation here for ourselves and for whoever's listening, but ultimately should just be a seed that's being planted. This, listening to a talk or reading a book is just a start, but the real work goes in our relation with each other and really being in community.
yeah. Yeah, man, and I think, addressing we talked about what a good man looks like. There's several behaviors I've come to mind that I've seen in my life that I just wanna bring up to you because 'cause I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Mm.
Um, and I know women in my life that have been affected by it, right? Like, these sorts of behaviors by men. The most prominent that comes to mind, and again, I went to college, a large university, UMass, right? It's like the state university, University of
Mm.
Massachusetts. You hear all the time of women being drugged,
Yeah.
that's a common behavior, that men perpetrate against women. Slip something in a drink, a girl is at a house party or at a bar, that she's targeted, something is put in her drink, and all of a sudden, she's passed out in a room and, being assaulted. And that's like again, an unfortunately common thing that I've heard men do. So, you know, if you see men doing that, or, especially young men, if anyone's in school or at a bar, right? There are people fighting against it, right? I know there's companies that, there's like I saw a nail polish or something that a girl could put on so she could like put her finger in the drink, and if the drink turns or if the nail polish turns a different color, like,
Mhm.
it could say that her drink has been spiked. But so there are people fighting against these behaviors. But,
Mhm.
to the women, I say, yeah, protect yourself, be smart if you're out and about, and to the men, recognize that you might have people in your life, men especially, that are doing these sorts of things against women, and do your part to, yeah, cut those sorts of people out of your life, and if you see it happening, protect the women in your life against it.
Yeah, say something because it's the degree to which it's happening, like, it's so common that the odds are that we do know people in our personal lives that are involved in that in some way, right? Or have been. The whole like, the statistics reflect it, right?
Right.
Whether it's using drugs or it's just, abusive, overstepping, anything like that is, it's something that needs to be called out. And, yeah, it comes down to, like it comes down to for me, it comes down to, like, how are you gonna be looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning? Like, are you gonna be happy with the person that you see? And whether you're the person who is, engaging in that behavior and you're stopping it or you're witnessing it and saying something, just for those young guys listening, absolutely do not let that kind of thing slide. Do not let that go unnoticed or unmentioned because it has great effects, and it's an important thing to look out for the vulnerable populations. Do your part to be a healthy and good man because um, the discussion on what does a healthy man look like, and we're kind of mentioning being in integrity, looking after those more vulnerable populations. It's kind of like that saying to me, which is like, uh, don't judge a person on how they treat their equals or their superiors. Judge a person based on how they treat their inferiors, their subordinates or whatever. I shouldn't
Yeah,
say subordinates, like in the workplace, right? Like, you know, how does the boss treat their employees? How does someone treat someone that they can get away with treating poorly? Is kind of
right.
how I would put it. Like, and when a lot of men, specifically those that are kind of ticking all the boxes for what we have sort of collectively agreed on as as a society, are the sort of privileges, right? Like, right now it's kind of like, European descent, for the most part. Tall, handsome guys who can kind of get away with murder, right? That's that's been sort of the archetype that kind of gets away with anything.
Yeah,
And to look at people like that and to 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 kind of look through that lens of, okay, well, if you're abusing power, are you really using your power wisely, I should say? Are you using it in a loving way, or are you using it for personal gain, right? Whatever that is, whatever that is in the moment, if that's getting the attention of women, or pushing someone out in a job competition, like whatever it is, are you moving in integrity? Whether you fit that description, or you have someone like that in your life, just using that to sort of gauge where you're at or where other people are at, and if action needs to be taken to make a change.
yeah, and we're just rooting for good men, and uh, I know there's a lot of good men out there too, right? They just might be lost or alone, and it's kind of it's probably, like 10% of drivers cause the most accidents. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it's kind of like I'm sure that there's, the population of men that are perpetrating these things. They're like, yeah, they're doing it a lot. And so it kind of seems like it's happening a lot, right? But like I do know that there's good men out there, and yeah, and so it's just like I just, especially for this next generation coming up, and when it I wasn't inundated with all this stuff, and with this generation coming up being online and just getting so many mixed messages of like what I see as examples of unhealthy men, or like kind of just trash men, dude. Like just like
yeah.
like just like that's not a role model, right? That's not someone to
Mm,
look up to, and these men are kind of being glorified, and I hate to see it, because it's like I don't want to lose the people that are maybe questioning things internally, or maybe uncertain, or searching, right? I was searching,
yeah.
when I was younger, and it's just like absolutely, um
Yeah.
be questioning things, but recognize what it means to feel good internally, and to have that self-love internally, and that reverberates outward. Like when you're a good man and you have that self-love, and you're surrounded by people that love you. And again, if you're in a relationship, and it's a heterosexual relationship, with a woman, you know, that matters. That integrity
Mhm.
matters.
Yeah. Absolutely, and recognizing that the conversation on what is a good man, that's forever changing, and for the individual journey, that will forever change as well. Your idea of what is good will develop, right? And again, we're
Yeah,
we're able to sit here, have this conversation. We're not casting stones. I mean, I'm not saying I've been an angel. I've come through my life and been subjected to a lot of negative programming, and I've had to work at this. I would not consider myself from years ago to have been behaving like a good person, to have been behaving like a good man. It's been a process, and
absolutely.
by no means sitting here saying I'm perfect. There again, our conversation on perfection, but it's just to try and build some motivation and some momentum to get on that path, because it is so much better. like it is so much more fulfilling and satisfying and joyful. And it is, again, such a beautiful thing to be able to look at oneself and to feel a sense of satisfaction. Like I've done better than I did yesterday. And I don't blame myself for who I used to be because I understand. I look back at that with more of an objective through more of an objective lens and go, wow, yeah, like I went through some stuff. I did my best. But I realized some things, and I made some changes, and now it's an ongoing process. It's a work in progress, and that's all it ever has to be. Don't feel like it's this, immensely daunting task to start working on yourself. You don't have to be perfect right away because perfect doesn't exist, but truthfully, to just be better than we were yesterday. And again, that idea of better will constantly evolve too, which is exciting, right? It's a path of of unfolding splendor, and like ever unfolding splendor, and because it doesn't end. It continues to expand. And when we apply some of these principles that we talk about, or we apply some of these ideas, we get to see that to that to the more primal minded man, the more egocentric, self-serving man, it might sound restrictive, some of these ideas, but ultimately, once you get past that, you realize that it's what seemed like a restriction was actually expansive, and it builds that motivation, builds the momentum.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think, and there's a couple more pieces to it, not to overwhelm anybody, but when people say mind, body, spirit, I think that's truly the breakdown of like the things that you need to focus on in order to, yeah, just keep trying to get better every day, right? Meditation can quiet the mind, get in your body, whatever that means for you, whatever form of exercise, fills your cup, or, gets you out of the house, or whatever that looks like for your situation. And then, spirit too, right? Like what are you having that North Star, having that guiding light in your life for reasons to march forward. And that's really hard, right? I know Adam. I told Adam, I call it like juggling, spinning the plates, right? You know what I mean? Keeping all, it's really hard to keep all these plates, and then add a family into that, and add, keeping employed, and add, paying the bills, add all those plates, right? And you're just trying to keep them all spinning, and it's really hard to do that. Like, don't even, I know, like, I'm not getting it twisted, right? Like, I know how hard it is. And when I'm keeping some plates spinning, I know one might fall. But then it's like, I try to, remain cognizant and present, and, try to pick that one back up. And then another one might fall, right? But it's just like, that's just life. It's that
Mhm.
process of tinkering. And, so it's like when those pieces are working in uh, harmony with each other, I think it's a really beautiful place to be, like, as Adam was saying. And and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, like you said, like Adam said. It's just, yeah, one foot in front of the other. And I had this thing, Adam and I have talked about this before, but it's like the floor and the ceiling, right? It's like, if you can, you know if you're spending 5 minutes a day on this stuff, where that's like a win, right? It doesn't have to be an hour of your time. If you spend 5 minutes meditating versus like an hour meditating, or 5 minutes going for a walk versus an hour working out or whatever, it's just like that. Those are wins.
Mhm.
Don't discount those, and don't be overwhelmed by perfection. you know
Yeah, because everything starts with just one foot in front of the other. And with that idea of perfection in mind, it can make a little bit of progress look like a failure if it isn't reaching that idea of perfection. But if we let go of that idea of perfection, that little tiny bit of progress, as you said, it's a win. It's all about perspective, right? We can have like nothing change in our lives other than our perspective, and it shifts everything. none of the elements in your life can change. Same job, same living situations, same relationships, but at the same time, paradoxically, kind of everything can change because of a perspective shift. When we see ourselves as more than just an individual separated self, who's going through this world just trying to survive, and we see ourselves as more than that, it can be really easy to shift that perspective as we work on honing that awareness, which is self-perpetuating. When we do that self-work, that body, as Stephen said, body, mind, spirit, it builds the motivation, so it becomes a feedback loop. Whatever we're putting in, we get more out of. We get back more. So it's really a beautiful process, and we see that the game is really set up for us to win when we just relax and release some of the control that we've been programmed to believe we need to hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah, a question I try to ask myself, especially when I'm feeling, just having an off day or whatever, I'm like, or, approaching a situation where I'm uncertain or afraid, is I'm like, what if it could be great? You know? It's
Yeah.
like, because like you said, that perspective shift when I'm like, before I left, bro, before I met you, I was terrified. I was like, ugh, like, like I almost didn't go,
Mm,
but then that question of, where I met you in my travels, but then that question of like, what if it could be great?
yeah.
And it was, like it was amazing. And oftentimes I think we're afraid of, yeah, we're just afraid. Like, and it's like and maybe that's just anxiety, or maybe that's just, that's just internal, right? It's not the external environment making me afraid. It's not like I'm being chased by like a large predator or anything. Like I was just like hopping on an airplane, not that, I guess, airplanes can be scary too, sometimes, but point being, like the fear was mostly internal, and then I had to shift my perspective in order to go towards a place of excitement and wonder and
Mm,
curiosity.
yeah. That's beautiful and right on point, because I think that it's important for people to reflect on those times when they have been in fear in the past. So if you're feeling afraid of how to move forward and feeling like maybe it won't be great, in order to help shift the perspective to maybe it'll be great, is just reflect on the past and think about how many different times you thought it wasn't going to go well, or the world was ending, and it went fine, and everything worked out. And even at the time when it seemed like it wasn't working out, 6 months or maybe even 6 years later, it's you can see how everything followed and worked together to come to a completely different outcome that your mind couldn't have conceived of at the time. And recognize, yeah, just that it always works out,
Yeah.
because the track record proves it. We're sitting here. If you're listening to this conversation, then that's evidence enough.
Yeah, that you're curious.
Hmm.
Even in
Exactly.
the darkest moments of my life, I yeah, there was purpose in them. There was when you're in it, right? And it's like it's like zoomed in and zoomed out, right? You talked about this I think in one of our episodes, but it's like when you're so zoomed in to your own situation, it seems so big, right?
Hmm.
But when you zoom out of it, which takes time oftentimes, to look back on things and to have a sense of perspective on it, especially when it's like a negative moment, but it's like no, like that thing had purpose because c- it I was still on a path because of what happened, right? And yeah, dude, like it's just I don't know. I sit now with a place of gratitude, and I think that's another piece of all this too. Is just again, not focusing on what I don't have or, what isn't, but like what is and what I do have as well.
That's a super powerful tool to find to find gratitude, to be thankful for what we already have is a great way of magnetizing more of it into our lives because it's again perspective shift. It's just like think about this was a an example that Ramdas used to use. It was like when when you're hungry and you walk down the street, you notice all the restaurants. When you're looking for a new partner, you walk down the street and you see all the potential mates as well as the competition. It's like so when we're focusing on what we're grateful for, we're gonna magnetize more things to be grateful for, more things to um, find ourselves in this state of like just giving thanks. So that's a really powerful one. That's a really important tool to keep there.
Yeah, man. I saw just like another turn of phrase was like I get, right? Like not like, oh,
Hmm.
like I have to go to work, but like, oh no, like I get to
Yeah,
go to work. Like it could be
yeah,
I could not, as an example, or like I have to cook breakfast, or it's like, oh no, I get to cook breakfast, or just small examples of that, integrating it into your life because yeah, like yeah, the day to day can be grinding, for sure. I bet for a lot of people.
yeah,
I've been there as well. And
yeah,
but again, that perspective shift is so powerful, especially on the days when you don't feel like it. If you can find ways to still have gratitude and still, have some sort of perspective on the day when you least feel like it, it's like a superpower, right? It's
yeah,
it's just like this little, yeah, man, this little I don't know. Yeah, this little gift that you're giving to yourself. Just walk through life with a little bit more control.
yeah. It is a gift, and it's funny because it's these simple things, right? Like these are really simple concepts we're talking about. Even like the I get to instead of I have to. That's really simple, right? And for me personally, my mind used to judge that. Earlier on in my journey, I'd be like, yeah, yeah, I get that. It's simple. Week one, personal growth, spirituality stuff, like whatever. I honestly bypassed so many incredibly helpful things and that I had to come back to later, thinking that I was somewhere that I wasn't. And so now I've come to this place of being a huge advocate for the very simple things because the simple things are the most profound. That's been my experience. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, no, for me as well. And they sound like cliches, and they sound corny, or they sound, I don't care what they sound like, they work. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But the
Yeah.
judgmental mind in me when I'm not further along that path, um, yeah, it's like you look at those things with judgment, or it's like that's stupid, or it's that's dumb.
Mhm.
And I was at that place as well. But man, yeah, they're really helpful, if you can kind
Yeah.
of just, step outside of your own mind and try to implement them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is important to have a look at that part. If there is a part of you that is judging it and look at it and see it and understand it and hold space for that too, in order to be able to create the container for yourself to welcome those practices in and recognize that, yeah, like a lot of that kind of self-help language has been judged as corny and maybe because it's been overdone, overused, been sold by charlatans, people who have been putting the cart ahead of the horse themselves, and it has like an energy of just kind of like a phony energy. It can feel a little, as you said, as Steven said, corny. So uh, that judgment though that your mind may have toward that kind of thing might be just the barrier that's keeping you from breaking through into a new level of awareness and inner peace. Which
Yeah,
so yeah, I would encourage anyone to always just sit with that and look at all of your judgments, including those ones. So don't
yeah,
don't hold yourself back. Of
absolutely. Not to say that there's not a place for discernment too. Like,
course.
there's there's people that will use these types of things who don't, or like, similar language, who don't, I don't think, have your best interest in mind.
Exactly.
Or are trying to, sell something, or, yeah, get some money out of you or whatever. But again, use discernment, we just we just want, I want what's best for the world, for people, for humanity at large. That includes whoever's listening, right? And so again, when you're listening to these things, um, especially when it comes from people like us, it's just
Regular
like
guys.
regular guys. Yeah, like we're not, um, we're nobody, but there's freedom in that nobody, right? There's, it's again perspective, right? Like we're no one, but there's freedom in
Yes.
that no one. Like we're no one. Like it's like it's
Yeah.
okay, right? Like it's all
No
good.
pressure.
There's no pressure. Yeah, we're not,
Yeah.
like there's wisdom in that, right? There's humility in that, where it's just like yeah, like we're not, trying to sell out a hall in Vegas,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something, preaching this stuff. Yeah, man, we're no one, but that's who we want to be. That's perfectly all right.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah, brother.
Couldn't have
I
said
think
it better.
that's probably a good place to cap episode 7 of Oneself. Yeah, yeah, that was a fun one, man. So Adam, I really appreciate you taking some time. Any closing thoughts for this episode on objectification, on being a good man, being a good person, and just kind of trying to get better.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw in like another cliche phrase, which is listen to your heart because, keep it simple. And that's something we've heard a million times. But for men out there who are who are in a position where maybe they're in a touchy situation, maybe they're surrounded by something that's going a little off. Their friends are behaving disrespectfully toward women. Maybe they're questioning how they're behaving in that moment. Just keep it simple. Listen to your heart. Just tune in. Those feelings will guide you. That doesn't and the more you pay attention to it, the better it gets. So that would be it. Just keep it simple. Listen to your heart.
Awesome. We'll catch you next time, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, also before we leave, sorry, I have to remember the plugs. If you like what you heard, leave a review, follow us, leave a comment. We're listening. We would love to, take anything anyone has to say into consideration for the next episode, to help anybody on their path. Yeah, just help us in the ways that are free. We really, really appreciate it to, kind of help spread the word and grow this place. And yeah, thanks for being a part of the community.
Thanks.
Cool. Catch you next time.